You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's jump off with a quick story today involving Gabby Petito. Okay, remember, that's the 22-year-old Gabby Petito and 23-year-old Brian Laundrie. They were the ones traveling across the country in a converted camper van. They were vlogging, documenting their entire journey for their social media accounts, and I should specifically say for Gabby's social media account. Well, on August 12th of 2021, police in Moab, Utah stopped the couple after receiving a report of a man slapping a woman. Now, if you'll remember in that video, which is actually very lengthy, Gabby is seen upset. She has swollen eyes from crying, and she's got a mark on her left eye. And then there's Brian, and he's kind of more calm and subdued. Well, once Gabby was calmed down, she was, I would call it, reluctant to answer law enforcement's questions. And that's totally understandable. Like, if she's in an abusive relationship, she is going to be reluctant. So here, let's just listen to about a minute or so of the police body cam footage from that time.
Him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him, I just like, I guess my vibe is like, I am really like in a bad mood.
You want to do me a favor? Let's go ahead and get you to step out of the vehicle, alrighty? Come on over here. You're not in any trouble right now. So, tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her, so like I lock the car and I walk away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything, so I give her time, and we really had a nice morning, if anything, but she just got worked up because we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go like arches before the Sunday time.
Okay. You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had a cell phone in her hand, that's why I was pushing her away, because she wanted I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not go anywhere, let's just calm down for a minute because she was getting really worked up. And then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys to me, so I got away. I was just trying to...
Now, following the police video, the two are instructed to spend the night apart. That was the advice that police gave them. And police actually at that time determined that Gabby was the aggressor, even though she had marks on her face and her arm. Well, the rest of the story you know. Days later, Gabby contacts her parents for the last time. And finally, when they can't contain their suspicion any longer, her parents report her missing on September 11th of 2021. Brian at this time was back in Florida with his parents, yet Gabby is nowhere to be found. The search for Gabby captured the interest of not only Americans, but also people who were watching globally. And bystanders in this case, well, they did their work. Gabby's body was found because travelers had spotted the converted van, and that led authorities to discover her strangled body near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Well, Brian had been named a person of interest in her disappearance, but he also went missing 2 days before her body was discovered. And then 1 month later, Brian Laundrie's remains were discovered in a wildlife preserve near his parents' home in Florida. Authorities determined he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. They also found a notebook that they presumed Brian left behind, and in that notebook, he confessed to killing Gabby. So we all know this timeline and the craziness that was this investigation. We had some high highs and some low lows. I mean, some amazing work to find where her body was found, but also the low lows of how could this not have been prevented? Since all of that happened, an independent investigation concluded that the Moab Police Department made several unintentional mistakes during their encounter with Gabby and Brian. The report stated that Gabby was likely a, quote, long-term victim of domestic violence, and they couldn't determine whether that violence was just physical or mental or emotional or a combination of all three. And this report led Gabby's parents, Joseph Petito and Nicole Schmidt, to file a $50 million lawsuit against the Moab Police Department. They filed that in November of 2022. So it was about a year after Gabby's murder. Well, on Wednesday, her parents revealed information about that specific lawsuit. Their attorney, Judson Burton, revealed that Gabby had called her parents during the interaction with Moab police. She was allegedly assuring her parents that all would be well because the police were handling the situation. The attorney said her parents urged her to return home immediately, but that they also trusted the police to intervene if necessary and to aid Gabby if she was truly in danger. Their attorney said the grossly negligent investigation that happened by the Moab Police Department, well, that ultimately heightened the risk of harm to the Petito's daughter. Attorney Burton argued that the Moab police officers placed Gabby in a police car while they showed sympathy to Brian, chatting outside of the car and even laughing with him at times. Her parents felt that behavior might have emboldened Brian to accelerate his abuse. The attorney then pointed to specific officers who didn't act appropriately in this domestic violence situation. Now, of course, the Moab Police Department, they have their own attorney, and he said the interaction had absolutely nothing to do with Gabby's eventual murder, saying that they're not liable for conduct that occurred a month later and in a different state. They finished their statement by squarely blaming Brian Laundrie for Gabby's death. Well, here's the update to the case. Last week, the judge dismissed the wrongful death lawsuit, saying that he could not rule on the constitutionality of the laws meant to aid victims of domestic violence. Now, if I'm reading all of it correctly, he punted the case and said the Court of Appeals could handle it. He said, as he reads it, the Moab police have governmental immunity. He dismissed the case with prejudice, which means if the Court of Appeals agrees with his ruling, Gabby's parents can't file another lawsuit against the Moab police. Well, Gabby's father had previously sued Brian's parents for concealing the actions of their son. That suit was settled in February, and the amounts and the terms were not disclosed. So let me know what you think in the social media comments about Gabby's case, and if you think the Moab police did what they were supposed to do at that time. Well, every once in a while, I bring you a foreign story, and South Wales has a doozy of a murder trial that just completed, and it involves the heir to a pie company, also involves best friends, and a little bit of mental illness. All right, we have 23-year-old William Bush and 24-year-old Dylan Thomas. They're roommates and best friends. The two had met at age 13 at the Christ College Bacron. I guess that's a private school in mid-Wales. And it seems the relationship was one of kind of yin and yang. William was the outgoing, gregarious one, and Dylan was the quiet, more of a loner type. And Dylan is the potential heir to the Peter Pies Company. That's owned by Dylan's grandfather, Sir Stanley Thomas. And it's a company estimated to be worth around $288 million. Well, the relationship seemed to be, that good old bro relationship. Both boys had girlfriends, and they were approaching that time where decisions are becoming adult decisions. Things like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do for a job? With his future in mind, William was making plans to move in with his girlfriend. And Dylan, well, he's not transitioning well. Most of 2023 had been a little rocky for Dylan. That summer, Dylan was arrested in a bizarre incident at Buckingham Palace. He was trespassing and entering areas that were secured. He told the officers that he was searching for energy fields, and he was looking at the palace, and he was also looking near Cleopatra's Needle, which is an obelisk in central London. So his behavior was just kind of wonky in general. Now, the women in these young men's lives, they're also getting a little edgy about Dylan's behavior. Dylan had confessed in the summer of 2023 that he was thinking about killing his best friend, William. And then William's girlfriend, well, she had found out that her boyfriend was occasionally barricading his door at night because he was worried Dylan would enter his room. As the holidays approached and various parties and dinners were happening, Dylan had been staying at his grandmother's home located just outside of Cardiff. On December 23rd, Dylan was out and about, seen on a video entering a restaurant. All seems well in that video. He and William were also messaging back and forth that night. When Dylan returned to his grandmother's home, he began conducting internet searches that involved figuring out where the arteries and veins were in the body, specifically the neck, and he also searched the term assisted suicide. Well, all the time during these searches, he and William are messaging back and forth. Finally, each young man goes to sleep and their texts resume the next morning at about 11 o'clock. Dylan told his grandmother on that day that he needed a ride to his home to check on his dog, Bruce. He claimed he needed to walk the dog. It'd be a real quick trip. So Grandma and Dylan drive there. And when they arrive, Grandma stays in the car while Dylan enters the house. Minutes later, Dylan exits the house, covered in blood, startling his grandmother by banging on the car window with his bloodied hands. Now Sharon, his grandma, she figures out that something major has happened, obviously. She runs into the home and she finds William with 37 stab wounds to his body, 16 of them to his neck area. Dylan places a call to the emergency services. Here, I want you to listen to just a brief portion of this call.
Ambulance, was full address the emergency.
Hi. I need an ambulance to my house.
Okay, what's the address?
It's Lander.
Okay, is the patient awake?
No, I think, no. Well, my friend.
Okay, is he breathing?
No, he's not. He's dead.
Now, I played that so you could hear almost the calmness in Dylan's voice. Well, William did die from his wounds, despite Sharon performing CPR until emergency services arrived. And Dylan was arrested for the murder of his best friend. As his charges worked through the system, Dylan did apparently plead guilty to manslaughter, but the court system held a murder trial anyway. As best I can tell with that judicial system, his plea of guilty does not have to be accepted. So what would be the prosecution or those representing William? Well, they wanted a murder conviction. They didn't want a manslaughter conviction. And that's exactly what happened last week following the trial of Dylan Thomas. During that trial, prosecutor Greg Bull KC said that one thing they couldn't prove was motive. He called that motive hidden. He said that for all intents and purposes, William and Dylan were best friends. He said they never discovered what caused Dylan to do what he did. Well, the defense said they knew exactly why Dylan murdered William. They said the signs that Dylan suffered from psychosis were numerous. During the trial, Dr. Pancho Xavier testified that Dylan could have been experiencing these psychotic episodes for up to 6 months before the murder. But the prosecution said that didn't matter. They said the hours before the attack showed, quote, clear thinking on Dylan's part. They also said that Dylan's downward spiral could not be blamed on psychosis. The prosecution felt that Dylan was just plain jealous of William's success. He had a great job. He had a girlfriend that he was either going to rent or buy a place with. And Dylan didn't have those things. Well, during the trial, Dylan's grandfather, the wealthy guy, he was there every day, including when the guilty verdict was read. But Dylan wasn't there. He appeared via video feed from the Ashworth High Security Hospital that's in Liverpool. He has been there for months. He's being treated for schizophrenia. And The Guardian reported that Dylan seemed impassive as the verdict was read. Now, that could be drug-induced. We don't know his treatment plan at that hospital. But I can imagine that left the family feeling basically without any kind of warmth during this process. William's family did go on to release a statement after the trial. They said they were relieved to hear the verdict, and they stated they still have not recovered from the brutal and senseless attack of their beloved William. They said words just aren't efficient enough to describe the impact the murder has had on their family and also on William's girlfriend and friends. They said on that Christmas Eve, William was innocently getting his items together to return to Pecan to spend Christmas with his family. And instead of William arriving at their door on Christmas Eve, it was Dyfed Powys police delivering the beyond devastating news of William's death. Now, they mentioned in the statement that they couldn't bring themselves to imagine the fear and the suffering that William endured in that attack. They also called Dylan an evil and manipulative liar. They said throughout the whole last year, they've seen no evidence of remorse by Dylan or a willingness to take responsibility for his actions. They said they can only hope that Dylan will remain locked up for the rest of his days. They then went on to remember William as a loyal, funny, caring, and trusting person, and they said his cheeky grin could lighten any situation. They also asked that people remember William for who he is, and not for the barbaric attack that left him murdered. Okay, how much prison time for Dylan? Well, we don't know yet. He will be sentenced on December 16th. I'll keep you updated on that sentencing. Okay, another update to the Wisconsin man who faked his own death by leaving an overturned kayak in the lake. Well, authorities have tracked him down and they've talked with him. And he says he's not coming back to America. All right, let me give you the background on this case really quick, just to refresh our memories. 44-year-old Ryan Bwart is a married father of 3 teen children. And when I brought you this story, he had been missing for about 6 weeks. His family believed he had gone to Green Lake in Wisconsin to kayak. But when no one could find him, they went searching and they found his car. They found the trailer attached to the car. That was all pulled off to the side of the road near the lake. And they found floating in the lake his overturned kayak. Fishermen later found his tackle box and his wallet. And despite extensive searches, Ryan's body did not turn up. After weeks of no luck, Green Lake County Sheriff Mark Podol decided to start looking in other places. That's when all the pieces fell together. They found out that Ryan's passport had been checked in Canada. That happened the day after he had apparently gone missing in the lake. And that whole story didn't check out with his wife. See, she had his passport. But when they started digging, they found out that Ryan had reported his passport missing months prior and had gone through the steps to get a new passport. And the new one was the one checked by Canadian authorities. Another suspicious discovery was that Ryan had taken out a life insurance policy shortly before he disappeared. That policy was worth about $375,000. Ryan had also wiped all information from his computer. After a thorough forensic audit, police were able to find pictures of his passport and the trail of him getting a new one. They also found a different email account that Ryan had been using to communicate with a woman in Uzbekistan. Well, 1 week ago, when I reported this in the podcast, a video surfaced of a man believed to be Ryan talking with a woman on the street who was recording answers of people that she just interviewed. This TikTok video was shot in June in Pacific Beach, California. And the woman, she was holding up a sign that read, "Ask me for free advice." That's when a guy who looks like Ryan pulls up on his bike and asks if he should go to Uzbekistan to meet a woman. Well, after the video was examined by Sheriff Podol, and after he talked with the content creator who posted the video, they determined it wasn't Ryan. So, as much as it's weird that a man who looks like Ryan was talking about leaving his wife for a woman in Uzbekistan, it's not him, apparently. I'm just left with a question. What's up with these women in Uzbekistan? They got something special going on we all don't know about? Okay, but that's not the only video. We now have another very short video. This one supplied by Ryan himself. It shows Ryan in a completely vague apartment. In fact, he's very careful to only show the gray front door and just a very little sliver of the living room. Here, give that 24-second video a listen.
Good evening, it's Ryan Bwart. Today, hello, Matt. Today is November 11th. It's approximately 10 a.m. by you guys. I'm in my apartment. I am safe, secure, no problem. Hope this works.
Well, I'm sure what Ryan has to say there is super comforting for his wife and 3 kids back home in Wisconsin. Now, that video was released by the sheriff, and he explained that they have made contact with Ryan. They know he's in Europe, but his exact location has not been confirmed. A woman who spoke Russian had contacted federal authorities, and she linked them to Ryan. Apparently, they're hanging out together. Now, the sheriff's department also said they were able to piece together the timeline that Ryan had, and now they can explain what happened on that day that Ryan supposedly disappeared in August. Here's what they said. That day, Ryan had trailered an e-bike to the boat launch near Green Lake. He stashed the e-bike before unloading his kayak and paddling the kayak and a child's flotation device out to the middle of the lake. He got out of the kayak and into the water. He overturned the kayak. He dropped his phone in the lake and used the child's flotation device to paddle back to shore. He then grabbed the e-bike and rode it through the night to Madison, Wisconsin. Ryan then ditched the e-bike and got on a bus traveling to Detroit, Michigan. From Detroit, he traveled to the Canadian border, and then he booked a flight to Europe. Sheriff Podol said in the press conference that he has expressed to Ryan the importance of returning home to clean up the mess that he has created. Sheriff Podol says his new primary concern is getting Ryan back to the U.S. soil safely. Sheriff Podol also confirmed that Ryan has not spoken to his wife or family. And Sheriff Podol did say that Ryan thought they would search for him for less than 2 weeks and that he couldn't believe that his story had received so much coverage. The sheriff responded with the phrase, "Ryan, you picked the wrong sheriff and the wrong department." Well, charges have yet to be filed against Ryan, but he could face obstruction of justice charges. He also could be responsible for paying restitution costs related to the 54-day search. Those fees could range from $35,000 to $47,000. And it has been noted in multiple articles that he could be facing federal charges as well. But the feds aren't holding press conferences about this fake disappearance the way that the Wisconsin authorities are. Sheriff Podol did try to kind of pluck at Ryan's heartstrings. He reminded him that Christmas is coming and that he should give a gift to his family by returning and settling these matters. I'm not sure that tactic will work, since Sheriff Podol said that in their conversation, Ryan said his biggest concern about returning was how he would be accepted by the community. I might gently remind him he has 3 kids back home that might be just a touch more important than his neighbors. And let's finish with a case I've been kind of peripherally watching for the last couple of months. I covered this story, it seems like forever ago, on Rise and Crime, when John and Carrie Halford were arrested for abusing corpses. See, these two own and run the Return to Nature funeral home in Colorado Springs. Back then, when I initially brought you the story on Rise and Crime, the bodies had just been discovered. Now, we finally have a potential conclusion to the criminal charges. Okay, here's how it all played out. We've got to go back to 2019 when things at the funeral home started to disintegrate. That year, John and Carrie, they began to store bodies in a room temperature facility in Penrose, Colorado. So that's about 30 miles southwest of Colorado Springs. They weren't providing the remains appropriately for the families. They had been advertising that families would receive remains that could be buried in fertilized trees or shrubs, hence the Return to Nature name. But instead, the owners were allowing bodies to pile up in this unrefrigerated facility, and they instead were handing over dry, powdery concrete to the families, claiming it was the remains of their loved ones. Prosecutors say that while sinking into debt, John and Carrie Halford used customers' payments and also the nearly $900,000 in COVID-19 pandemic relief funds. Okay, pause there. Those funds were meant to support their business, but they were using those funds and the money of their customers to finance a lavish lifestyle. Court records show the couple spent money on luxury cars, laser body sculpting, trips to Las Vegas and Florida, $31,000 in cryptocurrency, and then other high-end purchases. But you can't stack up bodies and not leave behind some evidence, especially odoriferous evidence, because people who lived nearby reported that the place reeked. When authorities checked it out, they found a gruesome sight of 189 bodies stacked on top of each other, some of them swarming with insects. And also, some of the remains were so decayed that authorities couldn't even identify who they belonged to. The building had become so toxic that hazmat gear was required for the cleanup. Newsweek reported that even with that hazmat gear, the investigators could only remain in the building for short periods of time. Well, Carrie and John decided to plead guilty last week to 191 counts of corpse abuse. So that's one count for each of the 189 bodies found in the facility, and then there were 2 more counts of burying a body incorrectly. The couple agreed to pay restitution as well. That amount, it hasn't been determined yet. John will most likely receive a 20-year prison sentence, and Carrie could receive anywhere from 15 to 20 years. That sentencing is scheduled for April 18th. Okay, don't ask me why it takes so long. I'll never understand how we can't make the court system at least slightly more efficient. It's also important to note here, the judge can reject this plea deal. If he does, then the case will go to trial. So how'd they get away with this? Well, apparently Colorado has some of the most lax funeral home regulations in the country. And although I'm not a big proponent of more government regulation, these are voiceless victims. Something has to be tightened up here. Colorado state legislators are working on new regulations. They've even implemented some for the industry. Family members of the victims did speak out after that court hearing on Friday. Christina Page, whose son died in 2019, well, she said this. He laid in the corner of an inoperable fridge, dumped out of his body bag with rats and maggots eating his face for 4 years. Now, every moment that I think of my son, I'm having to think of John and Carrie, and that's never going to go away. Well, 6 family members of the victims objected to the plea deal, and they are calling for the sentences to be heightened when the judge reviews the case in April for the sentencing hearing. I'll watch to see what's up with these 2 in April. I do believe John and Carrie are currently jailed, awaiting their sentences. All right, let's review some of the comments that y'all left me on Thursday's episode. First off, you all think Georgia law enforcement have lost their minds when it comes to Brittany. Okay, she's the mom arrested for her son walking less than a mile to town on a rural road to go shopping at the Dollar General. Michael Thompson 509 said the following. The mom getting arrested for the child walking to store is absolutely insane. When I was 10 or 11, I would walk to school or church or the store on a regular basis. I can't tell you how many comments reflected, I used to do this when I was 11 years old. And then Allie Hellcat Forever wrote that when she was 11, she would walk across busy streets to her friends' houses and she had no issues. What's the big deal with having her son taking a walk into town? Now, if you'll remember, on that episode, I also covered the case where the 3 school employees were arrested and charged for harming special needs kids. One of the things they were doing was feeding those kids Takis that were dunked in hot sauce. Well, YouTube user Nailface had this to say about these 2 stories. What an episode for me. I have special needs kids, including an 11-year-old. The story of the mom not supervising her child is not a story of abuse, while the story about the women at the school, and she says she assumes they're paraprofessionals, she says that's absolutely abuse. Clearly, the 11-year-old was safer alone than he would have been at a school. Now, I also had someone bring up a point about the woman who fell or quite possibly was pushed 24 stories. And in that story, Caitlin, or like we learned, she goes by CT, well, she married her allegedly abusive and wealthy lawyer boyfriend. And that boyfriend at that time had felony charges pending for domestic abuse. Well, then CT was found dead at the luxury high-rise condo units, and YouTube user Mrs. Code said that possibly CT was forced to marry him because he's a lawyer and he knows that a spouse can't be required to testify against him. I think Mrs. Code has a point here. This could have just been one more way that her husband was potentially controlling her. And then you guys, so many of you said how much you liked me introducing Q to you guys. That's my Chiweenie puppy. who's actually a really old dog. A lot of people confuse her for a puppy because she's only about 5 pounds. Well, Stacy Jaws, and or maybe it's Stacy Joes. I'm sorry, Stacy, if I said your handle wrong. She said on YouTube that the reason Q is getting all gray is because I kissed all of the color out of her fur. I absolutely love this explanation. I should have introduced Q to you guys sooner. She's almost always in the room with me, but she's usually asleep in her dog bed just off camera. So I put her on camera today, and there she is. She's just hanging out with me. She also sleeps in a dog bed like this in my office when I research the stories that I bring you. So Q truly is my furry co-host. And yes, her ear does poke up like that most of the time. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Thanks for joining me here. I love creating this community. This is what I have done things like this my whole life. I've been involved in journalism in some way or another my whole life. And when my daughter Peyton asked me to do this podcast nearly 2 years ago, we're coming up on the day that she called me and said, "Hey, will you be part of my company?" I was so excited. This was an avenue I wanted to explore, and both her and I love true crime, and it's really been so fun. Most of that thanks to you guys for helping the channel grow and helping us create these ways to kind of escape and just have a moment to breathe. I love creating that with you. As a reminder, I love 5-star reviews. You guys are pulling through. I've been getting more, so thank you. It does help the podcast grow. And then you can like and follow us on all of our social media accounts here and also the YouTube account. Oh No Media has 3 podcasts. It's Rise in Crime, Murder with My Husband, and Into the Dark. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. By the way, let me pause there. That will be the Thanksgiving episode. I am still giving you guys a Thanksgiving episode. So you can join me for Thursday, your Thanksgiving episode. And I'm Mama Jules. Keep safe out there.